What are weapons for? Probably to inflict damage on enemy troops. That's what we all thought. However, Russia's war with Ukraine shows us that weapons can be used not only for military purposes. The Russian army is using its arsenal not only on military targets, but also on civilian targets that are far behind the Ukrainian lines. Since artillery cannot reach these targets, the Russians use strategic and tactical missiles, as well as cheap drones to launch terrorist strikes. The most mass-produced UAV for terrorist attacks by Russia has been the Iranian Shahed 136, which it calls Geranium-2 in its propaganda to hide its origin. And then the question arises, why Iranian? After all, Russia has its own powerful military-industrial complex. Here it should be recalled that Russia inherited the entire military-industrial complex from the USSR. And in the USSR, factories and plants were focused on the production of armored vehicles. Tanks, artillery, tactical and strategic aviation, and missile weapons. Nobody thought about such things as mass UAVs in the USSR. For 32 years after the collapse of the USSR, Russia has not been able to master the production of modern weapons, and they have to buy such UAVs from Iran. Well, Iranian UAVs have a long history that stretches back to the late 70s. Despite the sanctions, Iran was able to master the production of drones, if not the most modern, then cheap in production. This means that it can produce them in large quantities using dual-purpose components. For example, two-stroke internal combustion engines, which are not intended at all for aircraft. By the way, most Russian UAVs are licensed copies or simply stolen designs of other countries, mostly of Israeli origin. Four-Post is a licensed Israeli IAI searcher, and Zastava is a Bird-Eye 400. Before we continue, we would like to ask you to like this video to thank us for our work. We also ask you to subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. We really need your help with this. What is the Shahed 136? It is a barrage munition built on a flying wing design with no plumage. The flight direction is changed by horizontal rudders on the wingtips. GVW is 200 kilograms, wingspan is 2.5 meters, length is 3.5 meters. The UAV is navigated by both inertial and satellite positioning systems. The flight altitude is from 60 to 4,000 meters. The radius of action is stated up to 2,500 kilometers, but there is an opinion that in fact the radius of action is not more than 600 to 700 kilometers. The UAV, or moped as it is called in Ukraine, is propelled by a pusher propeller and a four-cylinder engine. The cruising speed is 160 to 185 kilometers per h. The Shahids are transported in containers that look like ordinary containers for marine logistics. They are launched from the same containers with the help of a small rocket booster. Therefore, the mobility of the UAV launcher is very high. Any large truck can transport the container anywhere and carry out the launch. Iran uses a copy of the German Limbach L550E engine called Mado MD550 in its Shahids. It is a four-cylinder, two-stroke air-cooled opposition engine. Ignition is by magneto. The power system can be carbureted or injected, but Iranian engines use one carburetor for each cylinder. There's no lubrication system as such. The engine is lubricated by a mixture of fuel and oil in the standard 25, one ratio for two-stroke engines. A 1.2 kilowatts generator is built into the engine cover. The engine is very light, only 16 kilograms and powerful, 50 GP. While the working volume is only 0.55 liters. In all downed samples that the Ukrainian armed forces received, all markings of electronic components were carefully removed from their housings on printed circuit boards. However, according to external signs, these are Western-made components. Thus, the processor is very similar to the processor of Altera Company. Radio frequency modules are similar to similar modules of analog devices. Texas Instruments and microchip technology components were also found. These components cannot be called strictly military. They are components for a wide range of purposes, so Iran can buy them through third parties directly in the US and EU countries, and then smuggle them into Iran. In those versions of the Shahids that Russia launches in Ukraine, the navigation electronics are replaced with Russian electronics with GLONASS navigation. Since the Shahed 136 is a rather large UAV, it can carry an impressive charge of 50 kilograms of TNT equivalent. When such a drone hits a building, it causes significant damage. It can destroy an entire section of a 5-story panel house or several floors of a brick building. To increase the hitting effect, Russian troops modify the filling of the explosive charge by wrapping it with duct tape with a large number of steel balls, which increases the number of casualties from the UAV explosion and increases the percentage of destruction of equipment and structures. There is nothing to say about noise. A two-stroke air-cooled motor can be heard very far away, because of which in Ukraine it was nicknamed moped. The dimensions are small, so visual contact can be established far from immediately. The effective scattering area of detection is small, but modern radars can unmistakably detect such UAVs in the air. The drone is not very visible in the eyepieces of a thermal imager due to the engine placement in the closed fuselage. But good thermal imagers detect UAVs with ease. Since the Shahed 136 is very noisy, it can be detected long before it becomes visible. Therefore, the Russian army made attempts to install mufflers on the engine. And since the engine is in the fuselage, the size of the mufflers was limited, as was the effect of them. The increase in the mass of heated metal also led to the fact that the UAV glowed in thermal imaging cameras like a Christmas tree. Therefore, the mufflers were abandoned for future use. Some of the UAVs that were launched in Ukraine this year were found to have some kind of radio equipment that transmitted a signal on frequencies used for Iridium satellite telephony. The data transmission speed is low, so it is not possible to transmit a picture or even a video stream through such a channel, and no cameras or similar equipment was found on the Shahids. In batches of UAVs, which are launched from the spring of 2023, a detonator is used which detonates the charge if the engine fails. So these UAVs become even more dangerous and explode in almost any case, whether it is shot down, falling, or fuel depletion. The 136 is sometimes confused with the 131. They are almost identical in appearance, but the 131 is smaller and can carry 15 kilograms of explosives, and it has a rotary piston engine, which is not as loud. These UAVs are used against both military and civilian targets, and more often, against civilian targets. The first use of these UAVs was back in 2019 in Yemen against oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. The first use of Shahids in Ukraine was registered on September 12, 2022. At first, UAVs were launched during daylight hours, but due to the ease of detection, they began to be launched mostly at night. Attacks have been conducted almost daily since the fall of 2022, and as of July 11, 2023, a total of about 1,450 drones have been launched. The flight routes are programmed so that the UAVs frequently change course, fly at low altitude, and avoid potential Ukrainian air defense sites. There have been months when 20, 30 drones were launched across Ukraine every night, and up to 400 UAVs per month in total. They are launched in groups of 5 or more, and if the attack is massive, they are launched in waves of several groups each. Russian terrorists mainly target energy infrastructure, administrative buildings, hospitals, warehouses. It is not uncommon to hit residential apartment buildings and private houses with a large number of casualties. Civilians in Ukraine suffer first and foremost from such attacks. Sometimes, people are also killed by the wreckage of UAVs that fall to the ground after being hit by Ukrainian air defenses. The Shahed 136 is a very slow, low-flying, and poorly defended target, so it can be shot down even with an assault rifle, not to mention more serious means, such as man-portable air defense systems like the US Stinger or Soviet analogs called Igla and Strela. However, because the attacks are carried out mostly at night, the air defense system's crews are also required to visually find the target in order to shoot it down with small arms. For this purpose, the Ukrainian army uses searchlights mounted on pickup trucks, just like in the Second World War. In addition, they often use anti-aircraft installations, Soviet Tunguska and Shilka, which are in service with the AFU, or the Gepard installations given to Ukraine by Germany, which have proved highly effective in this war. The use of SAMs against these drones is also justified because the destruction a relatively cheap drone can cause can exceed the cost of a single NASAMS or MM-104 Patriot missile. More often, though, the simpler Soviet systems left to Ukraine after the USSR, the OSA, or Buk are used. The percentage of defeat of these UAVs by Ukrainian air defense is now 7,100%. Yes, exactly 100%. there are very often situations when all UAVs detected in Ukrainian airspace are shot down. The Russian Federation is building 2 large factories on its territory to produce Iranian drones. The factories are rumored to be secure and underground, also because Shaheeds are produced not only in Iran but also in factories in Syria. Apparently, Russia will continue to carry out terrorist attacks on Ukraine, increasing the number of drones released at a time. It is possible to end this hell for civilians not only by increasing the number of Ukrainian air defense, but also by hitting the manufacturing plants. But for that, Ukraine needs long-range weapons. In World War II, the Allies simply blew Germany to pieces, destroying factories that produced military products. It was only then that the Third Reich was defeated through tremendous efforts and at the cost of millions of lives. And now Ukraine is not allowed to strike military facilities on Russian territory in order, as politicians say, to prevent escalation. But what kind of escalation are we talking about when there is already a full-scale war in Europe, as a result of which tens of thousands of people have already been killed and hundreds of settlements destroyed to the ground? Not to mention the fact that Ukraine has become the most mined country in the world within a year and a half. And it will take more than a year to demine vast territories after the end of hostilities. The attacks on Ukrainian civilians have opened Pandora's box. Shahed 136 and similar UAVs pose a clear threat, which, however, can be countered. Now you know almost everything about these flying mopeds. And we really hope that you will never hear the sound of this nasty thing over your head.